We are live. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Brandy Keeler, Assistant Director of Admissions at the College for Creative Studies, and welcome to another CCS Alumni Live. CCS Alumni Live is a weekly conversation where we chat with amazing graduates from the school about their journey from high school to career. And today will be no different. We have an amazing guest who will be speaking with us about their journey. So I'm going to introduce our guest and then add them to the live for our conversation today. So today we'll be chatting with graduate Ian Galvin. He is a senior industrial designer and concept artist currently consulting in the entertainment arts industry. So he graduated from our industrial design program with his BFA, but he's currently a concept artist. He has worked for several Fortune 500 companies as well as smaller entrepreneurial ventures. His portfolio includes consumer electronics, electric vehicles, AAA game art, magazine illustrations, and furniture. He is currently a senior designer working with Lucid Games in the UK on their upcoming title, Destruction Allstars. This game is actually launching exclusively on PlayStation 5 this fall. So excited to talk to him about his career, his journey, and what he's up to. So I'm going to add...
Hey
Ian!
Brandy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. It's
Oh my
so
gosh.
nice to see you again.
It's really nice to see you. I'm waiting to find an alumni who doesn't look the exact same that they did like a decade ago, but I haven't found it yet. You look like you
I
have
mean,
not
the
aged.
only thing that's different is a haircut, and then I've got these white hairs coming into my beard now, so I think
Well,
that's
that's
about
different, but I
it.
can't see those on the live. You look exactly the same. It's so good to see you. I'm so excited to chat with you today. You had a lot of questions actually come in ahead of time.
Oh, that's
So I'm
awesome.
gonna
I'm happy to hear that.
I'm gonna have those mixed in with some of the questions I have for you as well. So let's start off with your career path, what you do, because concept art is not a commonly used term for a lot of people. So for those who aren't familiar with this term, can you define what concept art is?
Yeah, totally. You're right. It's really super broad, and I think of all the design, I guess, industries, it's kind of the least easily understood because it can be anything. I think of concept art as anything that has to do with entertainment design. And so
Mm-hmm.
entertainment design has to do with movies, TV shows, video games, comic books, like it's anything.
Mm-hmm.
You could be an entertainment artist that does environments. You could do
Mm-hmm.
characters for like an anime show. I work on hard surface design, so I design vehicles, props, weapons. Um, it's super, super broad. Like I like to
Mm-hmm.
think about it the way that, industrial design wasn't really a thing 20 years ago. I mean, people
Mm-hmm.
did it, but no one had really heard about it. And I think concept art has gotten more popular, for a lot of reasons. Video games and movies have gotten more popular than ever. And I think more people are just aware that it's even a career path. Like
Mm-hmm.
social media has like opened up artists and art careers that no one had any ideas about. So
For
it's
sure.
super broad. I'd be happy to share like my small slice of concept art. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of think that that's the best way to look at it is if you want to be in concept art, you have to find the thing that you can do because there's a billion different things you could do, but everyone has to find the thing that they're suited for.
That actually makes a lot of sense as far as like finding your slice. And I'm interested because, and this was actually a question that came in ahead of time. Someone asked, how did you transition from industrial design to concept design?
Hmm.
Because you're doing very industrial design related
Totally.
concept art. So tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
It's a really meandering path. My whole like path going to CCS and then afterwards is like it's like one part luck, one part preparation, and then like one more part luck because it's just like I never would have planned for any of this stuff. Like in high
Hmm.
school, all I knew that I like to draw, and so
Hmm.
um, I initially was really unlucky because the teacher at my high school was like the art teacher slash wrestling coach, and he took the wrestling coach part a lot more seriously than the art school part. So it was just like I didn't have any direction, but luckily my aunt is an art teacher, and so she's like, "Listen, you need to find an art school that works." And so she
Hmm.
found me all these books and everything, and then I discovered that you could like draw for a living. People design
Hmm.
cars, and like I've always really been mechanically inclined. Like I love to
Mm-hmm.
build things with like Legos as a kid. Like I love cars and spaceships, stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, I can't believe somebody could actually like pay me to do this. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I ended up going to CCS for initially was car design, because I just didn't connect the dots that like you can also design anything else. Like in my head, the only thing that people drew and then got made was cars initially. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. If I could do cars, that would be great. But when I got to CCS, I realized that like it's really limiting, at least for me. I mean, some people were born to design cars, but in general, like it's most likely that you'll work on like that much of the car for
Mm-hmm.
2 years, and then it'll be another year and a half before anyone sees it. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I get bored really easily. And so, if you remember Kevin Beasley,
Heck
um,
yeah.
he's this amazing fine artist now, but he started as a product designer, and I started talking
Mm-hmm.
to him about like, these are the things I care about, and I don't know if it lines up with automotive design. He's like, listen, you can draw whatever you want. You can design all these things. You can design shoes, electronics,
Mm-hmm.
furniture, and he's like, just make the switch. And one of the best things about CCS is that they have these paths that if you decide like midway through your education that you want to transition, like they're there for you. Like I just
Mm-hmm.
slotted into a new career path. And all of a sudden, after my sophomore year, I wasn't a transportation designer, I was a product designer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I graduated with. And my portfolio had motorcycles, furniture, cars. So it was pretty broad initially. And then from there, I got my first job with Samsung.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually watching Pat's interview with you before, and I was reminded of like how it felt graduating in 2008, which was terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so I was just so psyched that anybody, let alone a big company like Samsung, would offer me a position as a junior designer. And I got to go out to LA, which was great because it's like, if you're going to travel, in your professional career, like I'm very focused on being close to my family. That was always an important thing for me. And it was tough going all the way to LA, but like I'm so
Mm-hmm.
glad I did because that then opened up a ton of things for me. So I
Mm-hmm.
started in product design. And then again, like I didn't really know entertainment was a thing. But being in LA, like that's the heart of the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And so while I was out there, social media became more of a thing. Like concept art started to like be part of like my hemisphere of understanding. And
Mm-hmm.
when I was at Samsung, I was there for like 3 years. And at one point, the studio just downsized, and so half of us got let go. And I was just like, I'm out here. I don't know what else I'm gonna do, but I decided to take classes again because like I found all these little schools out there that were like, just show up, $600 and we'll give you like classes with like working professionals. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just started my education over again, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's cool that you found a way to get to that path. We found, like you were saying, with social media and more students learning about this path
Hmm.
and being interested in it, that we actually create a concept, design path now at CCS.
Totally.
But you, like you said, you got there the lucky way with a little bit of preparation and work too. So it's
Hmm.
it's amazing to hear how you got to that path. Now tell me this. I hear the terms thrown around a lot: concept artists, concept design, concept
Hmm.
designers, concept art. What would you say? Is it the same thing? Are they different?
I think they're all concept artists, technically.
Hmm.
Like anyone that works on things that are used for entertainment purposes are
Hmm.
concept artists.
Gotcha.
But like I had said before, like initially the breakdown is character designers,
Hmm.
environment designers, and then like
Hmm.
hard surface designers. So
Hmm.
effectively, concept artists who do characters like design all the Avengers, their costumes and
Hmm.
everything for the Avengers
Hmm.
movies. Entertainment artists work on like video games or movies, like
Hmm.
creating, alien worlds, um, you know, fantastical futures that don't really exist. And then hard surface designers, which is what I do mostly,
Hmm.
design like props and things like that. So like the latest Blade Runner movie had all these like really cool sci-fi like props that had to work. And so they have concept artists that specialize in like creating little objects or weapons that are part of the movie or the game. And having my background in product design is what
Hmm.
allowed me to kind of slot in because you're right, there wasn't really a concept art major at CCS. And
Hmm.
so initially, when I started taking classes out in LA, I was the oldest person there by 10 years or so because they were all
Hmm.
like younger kids who were like, I want to get into concept art. And
Hmm.
luckily, I had a leg up because my product design background helped me understand like how real products are made, how to make
Hmm.
things look like they could actually work.
Hmm.
if you are in the know and you get on a really well-known concept art website like ArtStation and you look at like student work, like a lot of hard surface designs, if some kid like draws a car, you immediately can see like 100 different things wrong with it. Now, if a transportation designer got on there and tried to draw something, it would look really good, but a transportation designer is generally not going to be an art station because they're designing real vehicles. So there's not a lot of people in concept art that are used to designing real world objects. And
Yeah.
so again, like I hadn't planned for it, but my background and kind of the mechanical side of designing real world objects has allowed me to start designing things for movies and video games that look real, and trick people into believing like, oh yeah, I could see that working without actually having to do all the homework of like, can we actually produce this? Like, do we have to get
Right.
marketing involved? Which has always been like my least favorite part of design. So concept art has allowed me to do 100% of the design I want to do, like 100% of the time, which is a really privileged, lucky thing to be able to do.
That's so awesome. So speaking of that luxury to design 100% of what you want 100% of the
hmm
time, what would you say has been your favorite concept that you've created in your career, or your favorite project you've worked on?
I'm honestly, it's the one I'm working on now. I can't like say a lot about it, but that's the fun thing is like before the work that I'm doing now, like in the intro that you were very kind enough to give me, I am working for Lucid Games right now, and they're coming out with Destruction Allstars, which is a huge game. It's a PlayStation 5 exclusive that's going to come out in the holidays, and I can't really say what I've done on it, but I've had a big part in the game, and I've been working with them for 2.5 years, and it's been a really great relationship. Because the crazy thing is, I've spoken to them one time, and that was for our interview. And so that was 2.5 years ago. And since then, I've been working with them just via email. And
Wow.
the ability to do that is, again, based on my background in kind of corporate design, like having a really strong communication style has allowed me to work with like a pretty big team remotely. And that, again, has built on itself to where I'm at now. But to get back to your earlier question, every single project's fun for a different reason. The last two big projects I worked on were Starlink, Battle for Atlas, and that was a PlayStation, Xbox game, and it's a Toys to Life game. So we actually had real toys that were designed, and the idea was that you could buy the game with these toys, and it was like a spaceship sci-fi game, and you'd buy the spaceship, and it would click into the top of your controller, and on screen, it would change to that spaceship. And it would come with like a
Ooh.
collection of weapons that you could plug in. So you would plug your weapon into the spaceship, and then on screen it would change because there'd be like a little chip, and it would, come through. So it was really, really cool. And then on top of that, at the same time, I was working on Spider-Man PS5, which came out, I think, in 2018, which is a really, really cool game. And I didn't expect it to get as big as it did, but I got to design his web shooter, and they
I saw it
contacted
on your
me.
website. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really lucky too because again, it builds on something else I had done when I was at Samsung consulting. After they let me go because I kept a good relationship with the managers and everything, and it wasn't anything that I had done. The company as a whole just downsized. They brought me back on for 3 different projects, one of which was the Galaxy Gear Fit, which is Samsung's smartphone. And so my I'm sorry, not smartphone, smartwatch. And so my smartwatch sketches are what Marvel and the Insomniac Games team saw on my website. And then they were like, we want something that feels like a smartwatch, but it's like a web shooter because Peter Parker's going to wear it like when he's not, being Spider-Man. So like, again, that product design concept art overlap, just it works in my favor, but I had never planned for it. It just turned out that like my product design background created a niche within concept art that I've really been able to like make the most of.
That's so awesome. Yeah, it's interesting, this intersection of things are being made for a non-existent world, but have
hmm
to be informed by what could actually exist in the real world.
Totally.
That's I think that's something that's unique about concept art that maybe differentiates it from like visual development, for example.
hmm
Um, so that's really interesting. That's really cool. All right, so I
Yeah.
know folks are throwing questions in the chat, and I'll make sure to ask those. Make sure if you're joining us and you have questions you want to ask that you didn't send before, because we had a ton from before as well, make sure you drop them in the question box at the bottom of Instagram so Ian can answer them live. But we will make sure to grab that question that I see in the chat. All right, so we talked already a little bit about what you were doing in high school. You just knew you wanted to
hmm
draw, and that
Yeah.
got you on the path. What made you apply to CCS. Did you look at other art schools when you were in high school?
Yeah, I looked at one other school and it was Art Center. And again, that was in LA. So it was go to the art school that's on the other side of the country, pay,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like $20,000 more a year, or go to the one that's an hour away from your house, and you can like go home to do laundry on the weekends. So it was not, it was not really a hard choice. And I mean, I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it's the only place I applied. So
Mm-hmm.
if it didn't work out, I don't know what I would have done. But I mean, CCS had all the things I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just like, I don't know what I would have done if I had grown up in, like Wyoming or another country. Like, again, I'm just a product of luck in a lot of ways. And I just
Mm-hmm.
feel very grateful that like it was there because it was the ideal school for me.
Mm-hmm. And you were a campus leader and everything too. I was like, oh man.
I don't
I
know if
think you
that's
were
the
an
case.
RA when I was a freshman. I was like, oh man, they're so
I
cool.
tried I tried to be an RA a lot sooner though because I wanted to live there for free and I didn't get any scholarships, so that was the main reason for going for it. But um, yeah, I could not have imagined like how much that school would have shaped me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
between the teachers that I had
Mm-hmm.
and specifically Tom Roney, he was my senior thesis teacher, and he
Mm-hmm.
was the one that got me into motorcycles, which is a huge part of my life now. I think my
Yeah.
brain is like a good 15% motorcycles most of the time. But he instilled like the kind of excitement that I think I carry through to concept art. And then
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, I think just about every one of my best friends is that I still keep in contact with. We have a text thread that we chat on, I think 3 to 5 times a day. Just like if somebody finds something stupid or funny or like really cool, we just share it. And it's the same guys that I've been talking to since, we were friends in college. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other nice thing is like I'm in Grand Rapids now, and I just realized that like my best friend from my first 2 years at CCS lives down the street.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and a third guy who was there with us at the same time you and I were there. I was doing track days with my dad, and I just recognized him. So I've met two more people from CCS recently. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine another school being able to like create that kind of like family feeling.
Yeah.
It's a small group. It's a small
Mm-hmm.
group, and like you remember everybody for
Mm-hmm.
better or for worse. So it's a good reminder to be a decent person
For
all the way
sure.
through.
Yeah, I always say you never know who will end up being your supervisor, your
Mhm.
colleague, your spouse. So you just want to
Actually,
treat everybody well.
yeah, and saying that, I remember when I was at Samsung, we did an internship program, and I brought a kid in from CCS that like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember as being like super. I don't know. We weren't not friends, like we were
Mm-hmm.
acquaintances, I guess. But like he got there, and he was just like the same kid I remember. He was just like felt very like he knew what he was doing. He didn't ask a
Mm-hmm.
lot of questions, just like kind of cocky, and like yeah, just we'll see. It didn't turn into anything. It's just like I don't know. Humility goes a long way.
For sure. For sure. Alrighty. So I'm going to start to ask a few questions from the audience, and my phone chimed like it's going to
Yeah,
die,
sure.
but I'm like, it's plugged in, so please don't die, phone. Um, I'm going to
I was
start
just
off.
thinking the same thing. I can't see how much battery my phone has, and I have it plugged in, but I have a weird feeling it's not charging for some reason. So
Yeah, I don't know what that's
we'll
about.
reconnect if this doesn't work out.
For sure. For sure. All right. So you mentioned motorcycles and how that's like
Hmm.
about a fourth of your brain. 15%. It's not quite a fourth. I'm an artist, not a math person. Anywho, so you
Same.
mentioned that you think about motorcycles a lot, and one of the questions that actually came through ahead of time was how well does motorcycle design and concept art go together? Are you doing a lot of concept art with motorcycle design?
Yeah. A large amount of my concept art does focus on bikes.
Mhm.
I've done stuff for Iron and Air magazine, for instance, and that's a really big motorcycle publication. They're
Mhm.
on more of the art and design side because a lot of magazines have kind of gone under, just traditional magazines, but like some of the more
Mhm.
avant-garde stuff still exists. And so Iron and Air, for instance, does their art and design issue, and one of their prompts is like, what are motorcycles going to look like in 100 years? And so, like,
Mm.
you could get a con an actual motorcycle designer to do that, but most likely most motorcycle designers will design something that looks like it's ready for like 2 to 5 years out. It's just like
Yep.
kind of how their brains are, meant to be used. But like I can look at like weird scientific stuff, like things NASA is doing. Like I read a lot of sci-fi, so I can like pull from that stuff and like just turn out some really cool renderings. Um, Also, kind of my introduction to concept art.
Mhm.
When I took all those classes, like I had to focus on something, and so I used what I learned in those entertainment classes out in LA. And one of the things that they suggested to me is like, you don't have to like design something from scratch. Like a really great piece of advice that I was given is like take like an existing intellectual property. And for me,
Mhm.
one of my favorite games as a kid was called Jet Moto, and it was basically a motorcycle game, but they were flying motorcycles.
Ooh.
And so it was really old, it's like really pixelated. And so it was a great kind of device. So you come in with a background that everyone understands. It's like, okay, it's a
Mhm.
racing motorcycle game. And I designed my own. I did a series of like 6 of them. And
Mhm.
then I saved all of them until they were done and I put them all out on the internet. And like a week later, not Jalopnik, Kotaku, which is so it used to be owned by Gawker, the media website.
Oh wow,
Um,
yeah.
and they cover video games. And so they just did a little blurb about like, Ian Galvin's redesigning this game. Like I wasn't really, but it was just pretty pictures. And so they went up on the website and there was like tens of thousands of views within a day, a bunch of comments. And then from that, I got my first person reaching out to me, a small game studio that was run by one guy who was making a motorcycle racing game,
Oh
like a
wow.
flying motorcycle racing game. And so like that's how I started working in concept art. It didn't go very well because the game got pirated in China. It was a mobile game.
No.
Yeah, there was like 900 downloads in the US and like 12,000 in China. And so we were expecting to make like tens of thousands of dollars and we'd pay royalties over years. And like something like a fifth of the royalties actually got paid out. But I had pieces for my portfolio
Mhm.
after that. And so, yeah, I draw a lot of like futuristic motorcycles just because, again, motorcycles specifically are different than cars because they have all these moving parts that you can see. Like
Mhm.
there's a very defined shape. And if one thing is off, like immediately anyone who rides a bike is like, this looks dumb. That doesn't make sense. So if you know enough to get yourself in trouble, but you know what things you can play with without really
Mhm.
offending people, that becomes the kind of sweet spot to be like, oh, that's really interesting and get people who actually care about bikes to like buy into the idea as opposed to like make fun of it, which is a
Yeah.
really tough thing to do.
Tough
So yeah,
line to
there's
strike on.
motorcycles everywhere in my work. And I would also add that like from when I was at Samsung, a really great illustrator, Court Newman, a good friend
Mhm.
of mine from back then, showed me his illustrating style. And so I took that in, kind of did my own version of it, and I did a series of 3 motorcycle illustrations. And now I think I've done more than like 70. I'm the in-house illustrator for Untitled Motorcycles. So when they have a concept bike that they're building for one of their clients, they explain to me what it's going to look like and I illustrate it for them so they can give it to the client so they have something, instead
Mhm.
of having to wait 2 years to actually get the bike.
Mhm.
And then I also do the illustrations for Petrolhead magazine and oh God, I think there's one more. And so like that's a quarterly magazine in France that like they focus on one bike per magazine, and so I do the illustrations for that. And, it's turned into its own thing. Being a freelancer, I have to do a lot of different
I was
things to
gonna
make sure
say you
I'm busy.
okay. Video games for PlayStation,
Yeah,
illustrations for motorcycle magazines. Like it's
yeah,
so cool that you do so many different things. And you're doing it on your own time in your own
sure.
location. Like you don't have to go and report anywhere to do that.
Yeah, the
That's so huge.
flexibility has been really great. The only downside is there's not a ton of security all the time. My wife and I just had our first kid, and so like security is
And
like, thank you. Yeah, he's 6 weeks old and he is always hungry.
yep.
Um, but so like security is super important to me and it makes me nervous
Mhm.
sometimes, like not knowing when the next project is coming. But
Mhm.
that makes it me all the more motivated to like make the most of each project because they always build on each other, especially as a freelancer. You're only as good as your last project. So
Mhm.
the people you met in that project and also the work that you're eventually able to share is what's going to keep that ball rolling.
Mhm. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. And congrats again on the
Yeah, thank
baby.
you. Yeah,
That's so
Ira.
exciting. Um, Actually that makes me think of another question that was submitted ahead of time, but I'm gonna grab a different iPhone cord just in case, because I
Do it.
really don't want to
Do
lose
it.
you.
I'll be right
I'll be
here.
right back. Can't lose our guests. It happens sometimes, you know? Not that the
I
phone
it,
does, but
yeah, well,
Instagram is unpredictable.
I worry that my phone's gonna die, so we'll see.
All
but
right.
I'm here for the duration.
Sounds good. All right. We're back at it again with the
Cool.
white iPhone cord. Okay. So, what question that made me think of, someone asked ahead of time, Alex asked, is there a high demand for concept artists and how competitive is the industry?
Yeah, there's a bigger demand now than ever, and I think it's going to keep growing. Um, I mean, if you look at the budgets for movies and games right now, I mean, especially with everyone being inside now, there's
Mm-hmm.
more desire for artists now than ever because there's just more content that needs to be made. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, right now, especially because people can't get together, so I think animation is really starting to take off and be more accepted among a larger audience. And I think that a similar thing is happening with video games between mobile games and console and PC games. It's really not as big a like cultural like kind of negative thing to be playing games into your like adult life. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
becoming accepted. It's how people like hang out with their friends. Like I know for myself, since COVID happened, me and two of my brothers-in-law and another friend from CCS have been playing Halo every Wednesday night. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, we're talking to each other the whole time. So like games and movies are becoming more and more of our cultural experience, and they need
Mm-hmm.
people to visualize what that stuff is going to look like. The downside to that is that if you want to work on the really big stuff, like you have to be better than ever. And I still see myself as like a very much like a mid-tier concept artist. Like there are some that I know, personally, professionally, that are like leagues ahead of me, and I can still get some projects just because even though those people are super talented, like occasionally they're too busy. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on a project now that like a really big concept artist that's worked on like Prometheus, like Elysium, a bunch of really big movies, like just didn't have time for. And he said, maybe reach out to Ian, and it was just like amazing that he did that. But there's space for everybody, but you have to be realistic about like what your skill set basically will allow you to work on.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That paints a good picture of what that industry is like, and the exciting future of the industry for folks who are in high school now looking to get into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have a few more audience questions.
Yeah, sure.
Again, if you guys are tuning in and you have questions, make sure to drop them in the Q&A box. So let's see. We answered this one, answered this one, answered this one, answered that one. Okay, so I'm gonna go to this question that someone dropped in the chat box earlier. So many people have been popping in and I can't keep up. All right. What would be your best advice to get that quote unquote corporate communication to advance to the next level of your career? So that was something you referenced earlier, having those corporate communication skills. What would you say is your best advice for someone to get those skills?
Um, Honestly, this is going to sound a little bit corny, but Dale Carnegie's book, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, like it's a super old book and it's really dated. It's probably like kind of cringy now, like looking back on it, but I've read it a few times. I read it in college and I read it after my first job, and it just helps you understand other people's motivations. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that's super important is not taking things too personal, and also be able to deal with people that come off maybe a little harsh or negatively, especially in the art world. Like if you're not on top of the pile, you're going to be critiqued a lot. Like your work is always being reviewed, it's always subjective. So that is kind of the downside to art and design, is that all of it's subjective. It's not an engineering position where if you design it and it doesn't fall down, like you did a good job. But in art and design, like I could do 20 different variations on a vehicle, and if it's not what my art director was looking for, like that's wasted time in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have thick skin. That's one thing that CCS really prepared you for, is like there were really tough critiques. And so when I got my first jobs and I was like really new, and even now when I get a new client, often there's a really big learning curve where they're not going to like anything. And you just have to understand that you're never going to be good enough that you can foresee what other people want, and you have to be able to roll and be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other side of that is being able to articulate. I would say, honestly, when I think about it, the thing that has helped me the most is when there's a big group of people and we're talking about like, how should we move forward? I feel like the one thing that kind of separates me and has helped me is that I can take everyone's kind of thoughts and wrap them up and kind of say like, is this what we're all thinking? Are we all on the same
Mm-hmm.
page if we agree that this is the way we go forward?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like that's helped me a lot just because, I would imagine in those moments, people see me as someone who brings people together, which in a corporate environment, you always want to be with team players.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that people who kind of like see themselves as like mavericks last very long.
Yeah.
Because even if they don't mean it to come off as standoffish, like you will eventually be pushed out, you know, in a real way, or you'll feel that way just because like you have to be part of a team.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn that on the job. And if you want to be good at freelancing, you have to be able to turn that up to 11 and make people who are not in the room feel like you understand them,
Mm-hmm.
that you understand what their motivations are, you understand the
Mm-hmm.
motivations of the project, and you have to be able to take their words and almost parrot them back without sounding like that's what you're doing. You have to
Mm-hmm.
share a sense of understanding, and then you have to inject your own kind of thoughts on top of that in a
Mm-hmm.
way that makes it seem like you're building on their ideas as opposed to like, yeah, your idea is great, but like I actually think this is better.
Right.
Always having that sense of teamwork where you're building on an idea,
Mm-hmm.
that has no ego involved. Like I'm the first person, and I was the first person when I was in my last corporate job at Pepsi to be like, I'm looking at my work on the wall and I'm looking at, Will's work on the wall, and I actually like his better. I think it would be cool if we did this with his idea. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to do that. And I think it's just kind of a cultural thing that like we're also worried about making sure that we get credit for things, that
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you're giving credit to others and being a strong communicator will get you pretty far, regardless of your talent level.
That's excellent advice. It makes me want to work with you, and I don't even have anything to work with you. I'm just like, yes, let's build a team.
I'll pencil you in for 2021.
That's amazing, amazing advice. Speaking of advice, I have a question I ask on every CCS Alumni Live.
Yeah, sure.
And this is a question where we get a little bit into some magic. We do a little bit of time traveling. If you were to go back in time, knowing everything you know now, having all the experiences that you have now, what advice would you give to your senior yourself about pursuing your career, about pursuing art, about going to
Senior
college?
year high school, senior year college.
High school.
High school, I would have taken an extra year to figure things out,
Mm-hmm.
because I did a lot of like learning about what I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
that first year at CCS, and like I think that my school struggled a little bit because I was just doing too much at once. I think it was such a great experience, and I had so much motivation because I just felt like you go to high school, you graduate, next year you're going to college. Like I was on this track, and I wish I had taken just a little bit of time, to like really figure out what I wanted to do and the best way to do it. Um, I am very open about this aspect of it. Like I am insanely lucky that my parents were had the means to help pay
Mm-hmm.
for school, and so a lot of people don't have that option. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
especially in an art design, um, you know, profession, you need to be smart about how you're paying for that education because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
Especially like a top tier school like CCS, like you get more than if you went to like a community college and like got, a few art classes. Like you get to know like the best of the best professionals, but like you need to
Mm-hmm.
balance that with like what your financial future is going to look like. So I think I would have just taken, a year to like plan out some things, like maybe work a little bit more, but so I could like
Mm-hmm.
pay for things ahead of time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't have done anything different except like, go straight to entertainment design. But that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an option then. It's like,
Yeah.
I would have put things on Instagram sooner, but Instagram didn't exist, like that's a great way for me to find new clients. It's a great way for any artist to start sharing their work and, gain
Mm-hmm.
notoriety. Uh, I don't know. I would have done everything the same, honestly, except take a little bit more time because I was just so excited to do it. But, I had the luxury of being able to jump in and make mistakes. Whereas if like a kid had to pay for it themselves, I think they would have really struggled.
Yeah.
And that's why I always am super upfront. Like a lot of my life is based on luck, and that's why I try to help out other people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing that was nice about CCS is like getting to know like a bigger swath outside like my normal experience. Like there's a lot more diversity of opinion, diversity of like
Mm-hmm.
background, like I came from a very like, standard nuclear family suburb thing, and like it was just so different like being in Detroit for 4 years. And it just really
Mhm.
opened my eyes to like how differently other people live, and
Yeah.
also like validating completely different life experiences than my own, and doing my best to champion other people because like I was championed by tons of people without even really realizing it.
Hmm. That's amazing. Amazing advice to your young self. And hopefully, any of our high school students or transfer students watching
Totally.
it are taking in that advice as well. And to your point about, taking that year of time to like explore and really figure out what it is you want to do. I think
Hmm.
one thing that's powerful that CCS has now is that pre college summer experience where students can try out majors,
Hmm.
any summer in high school before going to college,
Yeah,
right?
I
So,
think that's a great idea.
it may be, if you're a senior now, it may be a little late,
Hmm.
but or not late. You could still do it the summer after senior year. But if you want time to, dabble in illustration, dabble in concept
Hmm.
design, dabble in product design, and see which of
Totally.
those is the best fit,
Totally.
it's an opportunity to do that. But gap years are also that's something that's it's growing. That trend of
Hmm.
students taking that gap year, finding themselves, learning a little bit about who they are, and
Yeah.
then using that to inform their college decision process. So there are a lot
Yeah.
of ways to take that amazing
Yeah,
advice.
absolutely. And I also think that I'm super lucky that CCS was so accommodating that like I could make those mid-year transfers without it being
Hmm.
too much of an issue. I think
Hmm.
that again, it's a little bit lucky because like all of the design sensibilities, or I'm sorry, the design majors have so much overlap. Like you need to know perspective, you need to understand like
Hmm.
how products are actually made. And that applies to shoes and applies to motorcycles. It would have been much harder if I had changed from product design to like, ceramics or something. So
Yeah.
being realistic about how much you want to pivot, because
Hmm.
I think it's important to try things, but just realizing try a lot of things early, but you need to start like um, minimizing the number of pivots that you make in your
Yep.
career because you're gonna have to start over.
Hmm. That's a great point. Oh, I love these conversations. All right, I'm going to see if there are any more questions from our guests. Does anyone else have a question that they did not get answered live from Ian and his amazing insights? You've had so many folks tune in. It's like I'm scrolling through names and names and names. All right. I think those are all our questions. Do you have any last words of wisdom you want to share before we end our live today, Ian?
Um, I don't think so. I think now is just a really good time to be an artist. I appreciate you like reaching out because I think it's great to make these connections. Like it's always good to
Mhm.
see people from CCS. Like we haven't talked in like
So
12 years, I
long. I
think.
know. Yeah.
And it was just like I was just thinking back to like doing all our RA camps and like all those like stupid games we had to do to like prepare for like dealing with like ridiculous student experiences. So like I just really appreciate you reaching out because I think it's great that you're continuing to grow CCS, within the artistic community. I'd also say if anyone has any more questions, feel free to reach out to me here on Instagram. I try to make myself really available to younger artists because like I said, if it wasn't for my aunt explaining like you can do art for a living, like
Mhm.
I don't know what I'd be doing now. So, when I have like mentored younger kids or worked with organizations to like help kids like understand what art design is, that's really
Mhm.
meaningful because if I can just give a handful of people like a leg up, just to understand like how to go about it, a couple of shortcuts, I feel like it's kind of my duty to help other people figure that out.
That's amazing. And folks can follow you here on Instagram at what's your Instagram handle?
I think it's Ian_Galvin.
Follow at Ian underscore Galvin if you have more questions about his amazing journey as a concept artist. Ian, you've been an absolute pleasure to talk with today. I
Yeah, thank you,
appreciate your
Brandy. I appreciate it.
insights. I know there are a lot of students who messaged me beforehand, and I've seen them pop in who are interested in this path. So I know they're gaining so much from your wisdom. Everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much for tuning in and checking out today's conversation. And be sure to check in next week for the next CCS Alumni Live. Bye, everyone. Bye,
Bye, Brandy.
Ian. It's
Bye,
so good to
everybody.
see you.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Have a good one.
You too.